Now, one of the things we want to look at when we look at the sign of Aquarius, as we do with every sign of the zodiac, is look to see how they operate in different areas. For example, in the area of cash flow and how they deal with money, how they deal with relationship, how they deal with their children. And so for this part, we're going to start at the very beginning. There are 12 houses in the zodiac. Each house looks kind of like a piece of pie, and each house has a different area of expertise, and each house has one of the signs of the zodiac assigned to it. And what we're going to do is start with house 1. Traditionally, house 1 in the zodiac is always associated with the physical body and what you look like. This might be more appropriate for the sign of Aquarius rising rather than the sign of Aquarius, and it'll work for both, but for people who have Aquarius rising, this will work probably even more appropriately. The rising sign, or the first house, is not only physically what you look like, but it's the identity that you feel for yourself, and it's the identity that the world initially, especially when you're particularly younger, sees you as being. And we can put the sign of Aquarius here, and we've discussed most of it. But one of the things we'll say physically is many times people who have Aquarius rising, one of the things you'll notice about their face is they have what we call star eyes. In other words, I always talk about remember the famous billboards of the Marlboro Man, or those really beautiful, gorgeous male models or female models that have perfectly chiseled features. Their eyes always have this sort of like ghosty kind of blue-gray kind of color, and they're a little bit inset, almost like stars are in their eyes. This is one of the distinct qualities of an Aquarius rising personality, sometimes of an Aquarius, is that they have these eyes that almost pierce right through you, that are just clear. There's not one. It's almost like sheets of blue ice, which can be quite beautiful. The other thing you'll oftentimes see with them, too, is their hair will sometimes have kind of this wavy or curly look. And many times it's more naturally curly, very much associated with electricity. Jokingly, I always say the extreme might be the Bride of Frankenstein when Elsa Lancaster played it in the old Boris Karloff film. That's the extreme. Or they may have, like the Bride of Frankenstein, a real strong natural streak of color running through that's completely opposite color of the rest of their hair. This is another distinguishing characteristic of Aquarius rising. The body will oftentimes be more of a square build. They're generally speaking much like Capricorn, a little bigger kind of build. Nervous energy, but a bigger kind of build, because we still have the overlay of Saturn ruling Aquarius, which rules the bones and the bone structure. They will also, when you first meet them, as we've been saying in the myths and the stories, first of all, you'll see the charisma right there. I mean, you see great charismatic speakers having a lot of Aquarius in the charts, but when you try to get close to talk to them, there may be this sudden feeling as if they're sort of pulling away from you, which is exactly what they're doing, because they'll give you the information as a group, but to get intimately involved, they have to know you a little bit better. So they'll really, in terms of a personal relationship, stand back a bit before they let you in. The second house is associated with the talents of the person, their cash flow, how they handle cash flow, and the resources. And the second house, you can put the sign of Pisces there, which is the next sign of the zodiac. Now, it's very interesting because if their talents are exemplified in this area of the horoscope, they would have Piscean talents, i.e., they may have very fine artistic ability. Pisces is associated with vision and visionary work. It's associated with healing work. It's associated with painting, music. And so these may be some of the areas that they might find themselves very good in as singers. In fact, somebody who has a good voice who works with music or even has a good ability to compose music and sound might be a person who has Aquarius rising. They may not always be realistic about how they handle their money. This is a sign that may very definitely spend emotionally. This is a sign that may, spend the money on the impossible dream. That's a negative sign. This is a sign, though, that will always have enough, because the Pisces on the second house says that, even if they don't have the money, they do a lot for a lot of people. And so there's always enough there to take care of them. So it's kind of like the universe takes care of them. And when they're down to the last piece of whatever, there's always somebody that sort of comes in and helps them out, very much like the sign Pisces itself. Financial issues in the life may plague them. This is a group of people who may actually work on commission and whose monies may be very up and very down. When they share with others is when they get. And this is one of the lessons they have to learn, too, with Pisces in the second house of money and finances, is that by giving, they get. They may also be very, very good at working with the unconscious, working with people's dreams and working with people's working with people with biofeedback and hypnotherapy. These are all areas that they're very, very good in. And also psychically, if you don't like that word, intuitively working with people and being able to tune into people's psychic gifts, which is a real gift that this particular group has. Now, the third house, you can put the sign of Aries, which is very passionate, very independent, very me first, and it's going to do its own thing. And it's very curious and it's very aggressive. And the third house is, of course, the house of communications. And so one thing about Aquarius, there's absolutely no question. They are curious, they love to talk, and they love to learn, and they put all their passionate life into learning about whatever they can learn about. In fact, these people, this group of people, can be called the professional student. They never stop going to school. They always want to know more. They ask very direct questions. The third house is also associated with brothers and sisters, which may suggest that their brothers and sisters may be very passionate kinds of individuals. And it's interesting, we talked earlier about the brother and sister issue in the Aquarius myth or the Aquarius story. Aries is ruled by Mars, which rules knives and being cut away from, and it's on the house of brothers and sisters. So it might have been you might have had a really wonderful relationship with a brother and sister, but circumstances that were beyond control came in and cut you away from them. It may simply be that they live across the ocean or they live across the country and you live on the West Coast, or you live on the East Coast and they live on the West Coast. So you may even still have a relationship with them, but you can't be with them because your lives are different and separate. The other piece of this with Aries on the third house is that they really are very bright. Aquarius people or Aquarius risings are very bright. Aries rules the head. Headaches may be one of the problems that comes up when too much information is coming in and they haven't learned to sort it out. It may also be that when they study, since Aries is great at starting things, but it's not always good at finishing things, is they don't always finish what they start to learn. So they may have many interrupted attempts at education. So they may start a lot of things, but they may not always finish. And this is one of the challenges, because Aries is one of the signs that represents challenge in their life, is to finish something that they do start in terms of communications, learning, licensing. This is the house of licensing. They may have gone for a license or two and never quite finished it because something came in, interrupted them to move on to something else. The fourth house is the house of the home, the family, traditionally the mother. It also represents the roots that you came from. In other words, all the people that came before you were born that you didn't even know. In other words, the genetic family tree. And the fourth house, we can put the sign of Taurus here, which would suggest that even though you may be an Aquarian who is somewhat of a revolutionary or an anarchist, or kind of Maynard G. Krebs, beatnik type, that the family itself with Taurus on the fourth may be very conservative and very reserved and not understand where you came from. What planet did you arrive from? And it may be a struggle growing up that you're always different. They're always very reserved, very traditional, looking into traditional values, because Taurus is the sign of traditional values. And they can't quite understand you and you can't quite understand them. It is good to have that kind of a base, though, because if you're going to be an anarchist, it's nice to have some type of a deep root that you can base your life on and be anchored in. It might suggest that the family is fairly wealthy or does well with money, because Taurus is the sign of money. It may have been a family that invested in land and agricultural lands, because Taurus is the sign of the bull. Might have been that the mother especially was an accumulator, or the family was an accumulator, that everything that anybody ever used in the family is still in the family garage or in the family warehouse, because someday we're going to use this. We don't know how, but someday we're going to use this, and we don't want to waste the money or waste the time. We move to the fifth house, which is the house of Gemini, which is the house of children, your children, of your body as well as your mind, how you create what you enjoy creating, and how you experience and enjoy romance. And Gemini here says you're very playful in romance, that you have children that are very playful, that you yourself are a child probably, that your children and you do very well together. Children that talk, children that discuss things, curious children that are always reading 3 or 4 books at a time, children that are always on the phone, lovers that are always on the phone, or people that you're having a romantic relationship with is always on the phone. It would suggest that you really have to have a mental companion in love, or it doesn't work. Everything else can sort of be set aside, but if the mental companionship is not there, you won't be interested, because Gemini is a sign of mental companionship. It may suggest that you have 2 relationships going at a time, because Gemini is the sign of duality. It may suggest, since Gemini is the sign of 2, that if you're an Aquarius, especially an Aquarius rising, you may only have 2 children, or your oldest child has 2 or 3 personalities. It may suggest that your oldest child or one of your children is involved in the communication industry, in the speaking, talking, communicating industry. It may suggest that you have a good facility for writing or speaking, because this is the house of creativity, and that you have a very good sense of humor, that you would be perhaps even a good humor writer or a humor speaker. Moving to the 6th house is always the house of work, service, and health, how you deal with health, and another part of the body that the health really needs to be looked at, because this is a part of the body that when you're under stress at work, it might act up. The 6th house, you can put the sign of Cancer there, which is very interesting because the sign of Cancer is the sign that rules food and nurturing. It would suggest that you're more emotional perhaps and more nurturing at work than in your personal life or to the people that work with you. It can be suggesting that you're very nurturing to your career, like a mother to your career, or that people you work with are like mothers or nurturers to you. It may suggest that there may be, when there's stress, food disorder going on, that you eat too much or eat too little. It may suggest that in terms of the work, you're very intuitive and you use your intuition in your work. You can sense pain in people's lives, and this is one of the reasons that you might do well in the healthcare field, perhaps where you're nurturing or where you're working with babies or children or family products or issues, because Cancer is a sign of families and mothers. It may be suggesting that you might do well in the real estate or the housing industry, because Cancer is the sign that rules the housing industry, and this is the house that you work in. It would suggest that your work, in order to be work that's right for you, must benefit or nurture the public, or you will have nothing to do with it. If we look at the 7th house is always the house of more intimate relationship, like marriage and legal business partnerships. And we can put the sign of Leo right there, which would suggest that you have a compelling need to attract to you mates that have a big heart and are expressive, which kind of compensates for the fact that you have to learn to express yourself on a more intimate level. So you could be attracting the kind of mate who just loves everybody and is open with everybody and tells everybody that's what's in their heart. And this would be really attractive to you, because it's the kind of person that you would need to balance out your distancing that you find yourself doing from people. It would suggest that you have mates or partners that are very independent, that like to have their own way, and that have strong egos, because Leo on the 7th is the king or the queen, and it would suggest that you like that quality in your intimate relationships, but they do have to be in charge, at least have the appearance of being in charge. It would suggest that the kinds of partners you attract to you might appear to be or act like father or father figures to you, or patriarchal figures to you, because Leo is the sign of fathers. It may suggest that your mate has father issues that haven't quite been dealt with, because Leo is one of the signs of the zodiac that deals with searching for the father. It may suggest that you may be attracted to people that are in higher positions than yourself, because Leo is the sign of royalty, and that this is the kind of person that would do best with you. It may suggest that the mate that you attract to you, they really have to watch their heart, physically their heart, because Leo rules the heart. And that would say that the partners that you have with you really have to watch their heart by exercising and working out so that they stay healthy. The 8th house always shows our money with other people, our ability to attract resources from others. In the more traditional explanations, it's the house that shows how you deal with birth and death and how you transform through those experiences. And on this house, we can put the sign of Virgo, which would suggest, since this is also the house of your partner's money and resources and how you invest your money, that you have a very practical approach to partners and their money. That you can be critical. Virgo can be a very critical as well as a very analytical and very astutely able to see what works and what doesn't work in the area of investment. It would suggest that you might be critical sexually, that you could be critical of investments, but that you could be very good at details. Where Virgo is in the chart is where you need to raise your self-worth. If it's placed in the 8th house, which has to do with having the ability to attract to you resources and help from other people, it says to me or to anyone else that you have the ability, but that you need to have more faith in yourself, that there's more of an ability to do more than you think you can do. It would suggest that you would be much more attractive than you sometimes feel you are, and that you might be underplaying your sexuality or your attractiveness, or your ability to kind of hook into the sensuous side of life, and it would be an area that needs to be worked on. Partners that you attract to you may be more detail-oriented in money matters. It may suggest that you're very precise in the way you want to spend your partner's money, but in terms of your own money, your own independent money, you're not precise at all. And so it's kind of almost like this, again, this extreme quality in how you handle others' finances and monies, which might be a good argument for being kind of like a financial planner. You do well planning other people's lives, but not necessarily your own. And this is oftentimes what we see in Aquarians' lives. The ninth house of the horoscope is always the house that shows our belief system and our philosophy, as well as the ability to tap into the bigger picture, the higher education quality of life. And we can put the sign of Libra here, which would suggest that you're very definitely a refined thinker, because Libra is a very sophisticated and refined sign of the zodiac. That there would be a tremendous amount of wisdom here, because Libra is associated with Pallas Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom. You're very philosophical, and you're particularly polished in your thinking. It would suggest you'd be an excellent teacher, a fair teacher, because Libra is a sign of fairness. You would be a very good, we've talked about, consultant and information giver, and that the law or the legal profession or the paralegal profession would be very, very attractive to you, because the ninth house is the house of the law and the legal professions. It would suggest that you could benefit financially from foreign countries, especially in terms of import, export, especially adornments for the body or adornments for the house, like furnishings or clothing. If we move to the 10th house, which is always the house of the father traditionally, as well as our career, in other words, what we came here to do and how the public sees us, our public standing, you could put the sign of Scorpio here, which right away says that the public sees you as very powerful, that you could be very successful and you want to leave something to the world, that you're very driven in terms of your work, you're very ambitious, that you're very compulsive about your work. This is one of the areas of life that you really cannot give a rest to, especially if your work involves transformation of some sort, because Scorpio is a sign of transformation. It suggests there's a potential here to make tremendous amounts of money, because Scorpio is associated with banks and finances and monies. And there was a teacher I once had, she was a wonderful teacher in Chicago, Catherine DeJersey, who always told me, and she's been so right, I've seen it in so many horoscopes, that Aquarius is always the sign of the big dealers. Those were exact words. You see large contractors, large builders, large subdevelopers, large corporations, people who are corporate heads. These are people that usually have a strong Aquarius or strong Uranus in the chart, because they don't want to fool around with the little things. They want to do the big things. The architects, the people with work, the bigger concepts. And so Scorpio on the 10th house of career would suggest there is the potential in the horoscope to achieve on a very high level. It would also suggest, since this is the house traditionally of your father and how you saw him, that you could have seen him as successful. You could have seen him as one who abandoned you, because Scorpio is the issue of abandonment. You could have seen him as compulsive and obsessive, that he might have been a role model. And sometimes it's not the father, sometimes it's the mother. It depends on the chart, but generally speaking, it's the father. And that you model yourself after that person. But the thing to watch is to look at the dark side of that too, because there's a dark side of the ambition. And this is one of the challenges of Aquarius, is to look at the dark side of ambition. The 11th house is associated with our goals and our friends. Sagittarius is here, which means you're very well liked, that your goals always have vision, and so do your friends, that you're a leader in politics, a leader in humanitarian causes, but you can also be a dictator too, because, we talk about Aquarius being the age of Aquarius is coming, and it's the age of working together and having peace and 1,000 years of peace. But the other side of Aquarius that's very true too, we're talking extremes. It's the sign of dictators too. And that we can see the other side of the world coming too, as well as the other side of human rights and humanistic thinking. And so that's one of the things when you're an Aquarian is to, we talk about you want to be telling the group what to do, but not be part of the group, to learn how to back off on your opinions once in a while and let other people think and do what they need to do, so you don't take the position of being too forceful or too pushing for your own changes. They can sell their friends to do what they would like them to do. They're real good leaders. And that they're friends, because Sagittarius knows everybody. They're the greatest salespeople in the world. And it would suggest that you have the greatest network in the world, that all your friends would be the way you would get business, not just advertising. It would be networks. This person knows this person who knows this person. That's Sagittarius on the 11th house. And it would suggest that Your goals may take you traveling and that your friends may take you traveling. And one of the things you love to do with your friends is travel and study. The 12th house, which is the last house of the horoscope, which I lovingly always call the toxic waste management station of the chart because everything has to filter through this part of the horoscope to begin anew at the first. You can put the sign of Capricorn here, which would suggest if this is also the blind spot of the chart, it's not the part we always see, but it's the part that we really need to see and pay attention to because it really is our essence where we came from. Since Capricorn is here, it would suggest there is hidden ambition and a hidden drive for power. But it may be your soul that suffers while you're doing that, and you need to watch how to balance those two. It may also be that health needs to be watched. If you're inflexible in your thinking, which can sometimes happen with an Aquarian, it could breed poor health, particularly Capricorn kinds of diseases like your bones, your joints, your teeth, your back, anything that has to do with, the hard bone substances of the body. It would also suggest that there is a very deep ability to organize, but that once in a while you have to take time to tap into that part of the lesson here in the Capricorn's toxic waste management station is to learn to focus on one or two things, not on 15 things to get things done, which would take us right back to the beginning again, which is the sign of Aquarius, which is the sign of the Renaissance man or woman. So what we're basically saying here is this is a sign that's important in the development of the zodiac, because if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have change and catalysts for change. And that the basic bottom line for all Aquarians, a basic experience, is to view what's right in the world and what's not right in the world, and somehow through your own very bright, intuitive, inventive mind, bring ideas to people that they may not be able to see on their own. And through your own looking at things from a different perspective ability, you can bring change into the world and bring the change that's very much needed. And this is interesting. We're going into the Aquarian Age. We're not there yet. We're almost there. And this is a time for people looking at things in a new way. And that's exactly why you're here on Earth, is to look at things in a new way and share that so that life can make a difference and life can be happy and we can have that 1,000 years of peace that's been promised to us.
Hello, this is Georgia Stathis. You've been listening to our archived series, Myths and Signs of the Zodiac, and we thank you. If you like what you heard and you'd like to know more and hear more, please go to our website at starcycles.com, where you can find an assortment of available tools, pieces of information, and things that you can use in your own practice or in your own study of astrology. Again, thank you so much, and we hope to see you soon.